Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to HCMF live stream. Our topic tonight is sustainability in the digital age, and I'll be sharing this with. And yeah, we're going to have lots and lots to talk about tonight. I think probably best thing to do is just to go around our little panel, our panelists, and get you to introduce a little bit about yourself and about your practice as well. So. Catherine, would you be up for kicking off? You're on the right-hand side of me, so.
Sure, thanks, Sophie. Hi, so I'm Catherine, part of Invisible Flock. We're an interactive art studio, and we're based at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and also currently for 2 years at the Hub at the Welcome Collection on the 5th floor. So we're artist-led. And we create highly sensory installations and environments that ask audiences to renegotiate their emotional relationship to the natural world. So our work explores the environmental crisis in lots of forms. And we kind of look specifically at how digital art practices can offer new perspectives and potentially practical solutions. So yeah, that's a short introduction to our practice.
Oh, fantastic. Sounds amazing. Should we go to Des next, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Des. I'm co-founder of Soga World, which is a creative Web3 agency where we basically onboard talent and brands into the Web3 space. So we kind of specialize on coming from the music background, but obviously understand the nebulous world of Web3s when it comes to DAOs, NFTs, metaverses, and whatnot. So we went and did the first ticketed NFT music event in the UK, where we partnered with major league DJs, massive Amapiano South African DJs, for their first headline show in London. We've also gone and worked with the guys at Strawberries and Cream to tokenize their experiences for their fans. And at the moment, we've just gone and partnered with LimeWire, where we onboarded artists such as H, Anne-Marie, and a few other profile acts. And I'm also currently doing my PhD at the University of Edinburgh on remuneration rights for artists. So, yeah.
Amazing. Wow, that sounds fascinating, Des. And then over to Laura then, please.
Hi, I'm Laura Bowler, and I'm a composer and vocalist. I'm here because I've made a few works around the environmental crisis. One was called House's Slide, that was made in collaboration with the theatre director Katie Mitchell, the librettist Cordelia Lynn, and with public responses, verbatim responses to questions that were probing people's feelings about the climate crisis and things that they had noticed that had changed in their lives. And then that was turned into a work that mapped the ideas of kind of psychological grief in relation to the climate crisis. The work was also powered by 17 cyclists. So it was an off-grid performance. So all of the lighting and electronics were powered by the cyclists. And then the most recent work that I've done is a work called Distance, which was commissioned by a no-fly festival in Aberdeen and Cheltenham and Spitalfields Festival. And that work was kind of a provocation to how we collaborate internationally as chamber musicians. And is it possible, is it valid to use this idea of streaming a live ensemble from another country, which is also performing at the same time as a live in-person performer? And it kind of probed the questions around that.
I think it'd be a really good point to start off the conversation. Graham located an article on a website called reset.org. We have a really interesting quote from that. So I'm going to read that out and then we'll kick off the conversation this way. So the quote's from reset.org, as I've said, and the quote is, every single search query, every streamed song or video, and every email sent billions of times over all around the world. It all adds up to an ever-increasing global demand for electricity and to rising CO2 emissions. Our increasing reliance on digital tools has an environmental impact that's becoming increasingly harder to ignore. That means that our use of digital technologies now actually causes more CO2 emissions and has a bigger impact on global warming than the entire aviation industry. So I wondered what the panel think about that quote. It's part of a much larger article as well. So did anybody come forward with any initial thoughts about that topic? Everyone's been really polite. Laura.
I'll jump in. So it's more about the whole article, actually, my response. So as I mentioned to the other panelists before we started this live feed, I learned something from this article, which was great. And the article's incredibly insightful in terms of the kind of global impact, but also the complexities of what we're talking about today. But one of the things that I learned myself was that I was very naive in thinking that if I was streaming on my computer, it was the same as streaming off my mobile phone. And I hadn't realized that the impact of that on the carbon usage was much higher if it was via my phone. But one of the things that I have to say, just a very artistic response to reading this article, is that I was just kind of even more overwhelmed and even more depressed about the situation and the complexity of the situation, and just trying to kind of consume all of this incredible detail in the article and the complexity of what it would mean to try and respond to this and act as an individual. In terms of how I then choose to take this information forward into my life, and how I then engage with streaming, how I engage with the online, and what that means for my practice as an artist, and what that means for my life in general. So I think it's a very impactful article, and I recommend everyone to read it.
Yeah, I think I'll post it in the comments, actually. Yeah. Oh, Des, hi.
No, I was just to add to that, I thought it was a brilliant article. I think the main thing that it did was it gave you a holistic view of like every single facet that we use and we kind of take for granted about the CO2 emissions and the environmental impact of our everyday actions, not just this idea of, I don't know, if you eat meat then you're bad, or if you fly a plane then you're bad. It's like, okay, let's look at it more granular. What about if you was to use your phone? What about if you was to watch Netflix? How much does that cost? And what impact does that have on the environment as well? And so it really kind of brought things all around, instead of just looking at one particular area in order to drive a narrative, in order to kind of prevent drive a narrative for whatever propaganda reason. It basically said, okay, then, well, let's just look at the facts for what it is. And I thought it was really, really brilliant at being able to give us that holistic view. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting.
Sure. What about you, Catherine?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, but I got quite frustrated with the fact that this article is kind of 3 years old now, and like, why isn't this being discussed more? Mainstream, actually. Why hasn't the kind of conversation moved on in the last 3 years? And I just thought it was quite interesting about how what that data would look like now, after lockdowns, after COVID, after the way we've actually massively changed how we interact with screens and the digital world, has been impacted quite a lot over this time since that article was written. I'd be quite interested to know what it looks like now, actually.
Yeah, so true, because all our life, I mean, obviously we're broadcasting online right now. I have Zoom meetings, which I never used to have before. I'm constantly watching, not constantly, you're streaming TV a lot. I actually stream computer games as well. So I imagine that, this all adds up. And of course, we're just told that this is the new way of being, this is what we're doing. But on the flip side of that, I suppose the other way of looking at it is, okay, I'm not traveling to a meeting, or I don't have to travel to get to a concert. So is there an offset there? I don't know if anybody's considered anything like that with regard to streaming and travel. Like you said, there's a lot to think about, isn't it, Des?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of offsetting an experience, that's another question. Because personally, I would, if there's like an artist that I want to go see, I know it's nice to be able to sit on my or sofa and watch it, but I'd rather go there for the experience of being around other people. And I think that that's probably worth more than like um thinking about offsetting. But that's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm. Laura, did you have something you were thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, like it's just endlessly complicated. I was trying to find a section in the article where I actually did make a comparison to, like there was something that they compared to be basically equating to 1 kilometer of driving, a journey. I can't remember it. I can't find it now, but I'm sure people can look at it in the article. And I think, I mean, I totally agree with Des that obviously it's much better to have the live experience and go. And from reading this article, it would be really interesting to get, you know, to really delve into the complexities of what is the difference if I kind of drive my electric car to the train station, catch the train to London, go to the gig in London, come back, or, you know, if I decide to watch it via streaming online, and what the difference would be. I would love to know, because I really don't know how to work that out. So I think that's one of the difficulties, actually, that it's actually really, it's hugely complex to try and address these decisions that we all are trying to make individually, because actually, how do we measure these things as individuals? And we're constantly looking to those people that do have the capacity to measure them, but there is so much to be measured that how do we actually find the answers to our everyday questions? But one of the other things that I thought about after reading the article, I just remembered, was that I use Apple Pay on my phone, and obviously that is doubling up on the hardware, like of actually using the card itself, and it's storing it, you know, as data on my phone. And I suddenly thought, okay, well, I don't really need to do that, so I'm going to start using Apple Pay. Not that that will make a huge difference, I imagine, to anyone, but just those small things that I actually just haven't considered that about my phone in terms of Apple Pay, for sure.
Yeah, no, do you know what? Me too. I haven't thought about that kind of thing either. I'm looking at Des, and I'm just thinking, because you just brought up finances with blockchain and investments and things like this. Does this kind of topic come up within the NFT world, Des, actually?
All the time. All the time. There's yeah, and obviously there's this narrative that's being kind of perpetuated in the space that blockchain tech is obviously taking up a lot of energy. I mean, even with like Bitcoin, which is a network, there's been reviews and projects and stuff, essays written about it, saying that it probably consumes the same amount of energy as I think it was like Argentina or something like that, which is a lot. But then you have to put it into perspective. It's a lot because obviously when you look at Argentina, there's a lot of people there. But then that means that there's obviously a lot of people using the Bitcoin network worldwide. So it's not necessarily that it's a bad thing. And also it's the idea that, not to say that obviously the crypto space is it's perfect, because it's very much far from it, and obviously it does require a lot of energy, more energy now than after reading this article. But the main thing is that there's obviously different types of protocols that allow for you to work on a network that doesn't require much energy. So for instance, with Bitcoin, that uses proof of work. So basically how that works is your computer has to do an equation that is only smart enough for the equation is only smart enough for the computer to work out. And so once, let's say, but for simplicity's sake, let's say that the equation is 1 + 1 that equals 2. You get that right, then you get entered into a raffle, then you to win Bitcoin. Now that is not really the most efficient way, because you might have about 1,000 people all doing that same equation, and only one person is going to get that Bitcoin. Now, obviously, when you get that right, the next equation, it's slightly harder, but it requires more energy. And so that's where the issue lies, where you have all of these people doing all these equations in order to get the Bitcoin. But obviously that is not the most effective and the most efficient technology. You have other protocols like proof of stake, which is essentially where you basically buy your way in onto the blockchain instead of having to do an equation to work it out. And that literally reduces the amount of energy used. So for instance, it on certain on certain blockchains, like on Polygon Matic, the amount that it takes to mint one polygon or one token is the equivalent of sending a tenth of a tweet. And so there's like two massive differences in terms of different blockchains, but that really does come down to the protocol. But everybody just assumes, because they don't really know much about Bitcoin, they just assume that all cryptocurrencies and all blockchains are really bad, when the truth is it's not. I mean, obviously I can get into it a bit more, but yeah, you have the idea that, like, when you know that when you're creating crypto, you're directly incentivized in order to make money, because that's the only reason why you're doing it. So you're not going to try and create crypto using energy directly from your plug sockets, because it's expensive. And like, as I said, when you do that equation, the amount of it costs to create Bitcoin is the actual price of Bitcoin, which last I checked was about what, 17,000, 20,000 pounds or whatever. I don't know how many people want to have a 17 grand electric bill, especially with inflation coming up, and they're saying that we're going to be having to spend 80% more this time next year. So
Yeah, sure.
yeah, but so this is where now you're starting to realize, and I suppose this is something that I was going to mention, is like what I'm now starting to find is that a lot of crypto companies are now being incentivized to find alternative options in order to kind of drive better usage of energy. Because what's the cheapest way of energy, like for getting energy? Sun, wind, hydro. So they're actually trying to figure out more cost-effective ways in order to generate income. And so that's another narrative that I feel like a lot of people don't realize, but it's obviously out there.
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about. I'd be really interested to hear about your take on musicians embracing this kind of digital medium. But I'm going to bring in Catherine, actually, because I know that Invisible Flock, using technology, new technology as a digital medium, is really at the heart of your practice. I suppose, and as is environmental issues as well. That's the whole reason that the company exists, isn't it? But I don't know, have Invisible Flock, have you ever kind of considered, like, all these different projects that you use, your carbon footprint when you're making them? Is that something you sort of work on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like you say, kind of, we're really, really interested in kind of, I guess, our relationships with technology, our relationships with data. We always think of technology as being a way of generating kind of alternative questions or understandings, or opening up sort of ideas to audiences that you wouldn't actually be able to access otherwise. But we always kind of, I suppose we talk about using technology as a medium. So we're always sort of challenging and manipulating the digital kind of space. Using it as an artistic medium rather than a tool. We're not really, we don't really kind of engage with it in quite that way. We sort of look at kind of, really challenging, trying to challenge digital spaces in the way we connect with them. So sometimes that's been kind of in public spaces, how challenging how you might use your mobile phone, or kind of more screen based work. And I suppose I think that it means that maybe maybe kind of drawing us closer together with understanding the physical nature of technology. I think we're quite interested in that, and I think that's kind of something that was really came through that article really as well, is that we sometimes it's very difficult to kind of engage and comprehend and understand scale of technology that we consume as consumers. And I suppose that's quite what we're quite interested in playing with when we use technology as in installations or kind of experience-based work, is kind of looking at that physical presence of data. So we use a lot of sound in our work, and often we kind of collect that digitally rather than in an analog way. And so so yeah, I think, you know, we always have that dichotomy of you know, making work about the environmental crisis using technology, but I think by it we always consider what we're making and why we're making it, and that kind of has to come at the center of it, rather than deciding to use a particular piece of technology. It has to kind of come from that thematic, and that how can we engage an audience and connect them with something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to connect with as an experience, I suppose. But we're also kind of interested in kind of looking at the cost of innovation. So we have a project where we're kind of specifically looking at the economic and environmental perspective of using technology, and how we can enable ourselves as artists and our peers to kind of share technology that might not necessarily be otherwise accessible, but can we kind of reduce the scale of technology consumed by processes of sharing and networking. So that's something that's quite kind of key to our practice as well.
Do you mean sharing and processing online, especially, or do you mean in a sort of in real life space?
Yeah, through our studio practice. So physically, physically sharing kit and resources and knowledge, I suppose, as well. So yeah, that's quite an important aspect of it. I think, you know, when being self-taught technologists and kind of iterating with technology in the way we do, is kind of, yeah, opening it up as a playful sort of process that, you know, anybody can learn, is really important.
Sounds fascinating. Laura, I've come on to you because you've obviously done a couple of pieces recently that touch on similar areas. Perhaps do you consider technology as much in your work as Catherine's company does?
Yeah, well, certainly, like with the bike-powered work, obviously that was very technological in terms of setting that up and what the bike power, how that would work in terms of what the capacity we would need, how many cyclists we would need at whatever speed in order to power the electronics in the work, and also all the microphones of the entire ensemble and the singer. And also the lights as well, the music stand lights. And we also, as part of that project, we kept a measure of the carbon footprint of the work as well. And it's actually still being worked out. And we did the project last July, but because it was no one specific role, it's been kind of like shared between people and passed on. So we're still in the process of working it out, because we also took into account every single meeting as well, every single meeting in terms of the creative process, which was going on for months, any Zoom meetings, any emails, like every single moment, the hours I spent on software on my computer, like all of that was part of kind of measuring the carbon footprint of the work. But then the recent work that I made, Distance, which more directly relates to this, it was kind of a provocation by Fiona Robertson, who decided to do a no-fly festival. And she kind of came to me and said, I would love you to write a piece where it's an international collaboration with an ensemble from New York, with a live in-person singer from the UK. And both a provocation artistically is like, what can you do with that? Like, how is that going to work because of inevitable problems of communication and lag and things like that? But also, like, how could I make that format address the kind of the complexities of flight travel, but also how I could also address like these ideas of empathetic distance. So the things that we are furthest away from, the idea that we have less empathy for the things that are the furthest away from us, the least tangible to us. And so the work kind of it's very much a provocation for people to think about flight travel, but also to really think about, because it uses text by an amazing writer called Timothy Ingold, who examines our kind of perception of flight travel through looking at the psychology of how we experience it. So the fact that we are no longer wayfaring through the land, we are no longer actually engaging with the earth and touching the land. We are traveling but not moving. There's also the oxygen deficit element of flight travel, and all of these various, psychological effects that flight travel have on us, and then how in turn that affects our relationship to the environment. So that's kind of what the text centers on. But then it also, inevitably, because of the practice of doing it, so the ensemble was streamed live, both video and sound, from New York via Zoom. But Juliet, the singer, was sent to in-ear pieces of the ensemble via clean feed. So there was no video going the other way. So the ensemble never saw Juliet at all throughout all the rehearsals and the actual performance. They only ever heard her in their ear. And they were kind of managing this, it depended on the venue that we were performing in, but it could be anything from kind of like a 1 second delay. So Juliet would always sound slightly behind to them, to 1.5 seconds in certain places. And so it was kind of a provocation, both as to us as artists, but also to the audience, to kind of ask these questions of what does it mean to try and kind of communicate musically in this way? What does it mean for us psychologically to try and do that, both as a rehearsal process and in performance? But also kind of, is it even valid as a format? Because by kind of taking away flight travel, does that actually improve the situation in terms of its environmental impact if we're streaming and all the rehearsals are streamed as well? So it was kind of an all-round kind of provocation to everyone who was involved in it. But one of the things that I find quite interesting about making work like this is that, in terms of audience responses, sometimes you get quite aggressive responses to work like this in terms of like people who feel like maybe they're being attacked for their choice to fly. And so even if the work is very much a dialogue with this, I think people feel can have a tendency to come to work like this and feel like that, their experience is invalid or their reasons are invalid, even if the work is trying to have a dialogue. And so it's quite a sensitive area to make work around, for sure.
Wow. Has anybody, Catherine or Des, have you got any sort of, we've just heard through really interesting sort of comments, but has anyone got any thoughts about each other's practices based on what we've just been talking about at all?
I feel like Laura's practice is very experimental.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it can be replicated on a mass scale, but I think it's dope.
I was wondering about the empathetic distance though, Laura. Like, what were your kind of findings around that? Did you feel like you could create the same sense of empathy from, was it successful in sort of building that with an audience in the way you'd hoped?
I think it was really interesting. Obviously, I can't, from the perspective of the audience, it's difficult for me to reflect on that because, I didn't speak to every audience member, but I certainly had some comments that were, that were both ends of the spectrum, that were kind of very intrigued by this provocation and what that means in terms of their relationship to the ensemble who aren't actually present. But also there were those people that felt like the ensemble were actually present because of their relationship to the live performer. And so there were very different experiences of it. But I think what was really important actually in the learning process of it is Juliet, the singer, is very much a chamber musician. That's what she loves doing. And so when we talked about the project, she said, well, I'm basically going to be on my own. Like, this is just going to be me on my own, and these other people are going to be across the other side of the world. So I'm not so keen on doing that. And so to kind of counter that, we brought on a movement director who could also be in the room with Juliet to have that collaborative relationship in the physical space, which enabled her to have those in-person conversations that she would maybe otherwise have with the ensemble. And I think, like, inevitably, there was, musicians are incredibly orally sensitive, so that, that empathy was there in terms of their relationship to Juliet. And obviously she was right in their ears as well. She's very present for them. And also there was this kind of, this very much kind of team spirit to make it try and happen, this ridiculous idea that we all had to make. But at the same time, I think, for me as the composer, I certainly feel like I don't have the same relationship with that ensemble as I've had with ensembles that I have worked with in person. And they're amazing ensemble, but I've never met them in reality. Like, I've never sat down in a break and had a coffee with them, so it is quite a strange experience to have collaborated with someone and had them perform your work 3 times at different points in the year, and to actually feel like you don't really know them. And I think that's quite interesting, and it's just interesting to reflect on what that means.
Yeah, definitely. I know with HCMF, when we commissioned the Zeitgeist commissions, a lot of the composers hadn't met lots of performers, and obviously the videos were being made and produced and put online during the festival. And yeah, speaking to composers, when we did get to meet, a lot of them were saying what you're saying then, Laura, like it is really bizarre kind of situation where you've not actually engaged with the people who play in your works. I just want to take this moment actually to say to the audience who are watching out there on the various platforms, if you've got any questions, feel free to put them into the comments on YouTube or Facebook, because we can see them and we can filter them through to the guests. Yeah, I wanted to ask Des actually about how musicians are sort of using NFTs at the moment, and because I often see online like quite a lot of sort of negativity about NFTs, and like you sort of brought up earlier, like the amount of power that gets used to generate them, servers being cooled down, etc., etc. But I've found a really interesting website which promoted video NFTs, and the idea was that only 250 of these would get sold, and it meant that artists would be able to continue to have a cut of the NFT when it gets sold on, that kind of thing. I just wondered if you could explain a little bit about that to an audience, because to be honest, I think a lot of people still don't really know what they are in the music industry.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So NFTs, the best way that I like to describe NFTs are, well, obviously NFTs stand for non-fungible tokens. So when I say something is fungible, I that means like something that retains value, the same constant value. So like a pound coin that is fungible. I can swap my pound coin for your pound coin in your wallet, Sophie, and then you can go to Tesco's and buy a bottle of water for £1. That's what fungibility means. When something is non-fungible, that basically means that the value that you put on an item can fluctuate depending on what the fan or whoever wants to pay it for. So for instance, Pokemon cards, they are non-fungible items. For certain people like JME, Logan Paul, they'll happily spend 250,000 on a shiny Charizard. For me, it's toilet paper. It has no value. And so that's where this is obviously gets really, really cool, because when you have blockchain technology, what it does is for the first time ever you can actually have digital creations where when you put them on the blockchain actually hold value. So for instance, if you was to go and have, I don't know, go on Instagram, have like a JPEG file, a movie file, an MP3 file, there's absolutely nothing stopping people from taking them and swapping them between each other on Web 2 and the value basically being lost. Or there's no, well, there is value, but it's in terms of actually retainable monetary value, it's being lost because people just share it amongst each other. But with NFTs, what that does is that it actually allows people to not only create digital items or artistic creations, put it on the blockchain, but because basically of what a blockchain is, it's a ledger, it's a book that basically shows the entire story of a digital creation. So for instance, Laura with her song and her piece, if she was to put that on the blockchain, she can then see, okay, then I went and passed that over to Des for a fee. Des then went and passed that, sold that onto somebody else for another fee. But the great thing is that you can actually attach a royalty on it because it's all code. So if I was to then sell that to Catherine, that particular art piece or the song, on the smart contract that is controlling this particular NFT or this art piece, it will automatically say, because Laura was the original composer and the original person to own and create this NFT or this art piece, she is entitled to 10%. So in comparison, if I was to
Forever.
go and buy, I don't know, forever,
Yeah.
forever in perpetuity. So if I was to go to HMV and buy a CD, like, I don't know, Britney Spears CD, and I've done listening to it, I can go to a car boot sale and then sell that to somebody else. And the original copyright owners won't see a penny of that. And that is a problem. And even though we don't see it as a problem, because we think that because we've gone and bought the CD, that we own it, but really we don't. We own the license to it. So the actual music is still owned by the original masters, people who hold that copyright. I'm getting into like copyright law and stuff, but I won't get to. I'll keep it very, very granular. I mean, but what really should happen is that when you then go off to sell that CD, the original copyright holder should technically see some sort of remuneration, and that's where this blockchain technology is amazing. Now, coming back to the original question about how artists and musicians are using NFTs, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful because, like, with blockchain tech, it's the first, like, NFTs can really be understood through using art and music because, again, as I said before, when people were like sharing files on WinMX, Kazaa, like Napster back in the day, music held no value. Now there's actually a chance for music to actually hold some sort of value. But if you want to take it on steroids, if you was to have that one song and put it on the blockchain and then use that blockchain as a data source, so people can then, so you can have like YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, all of these different social media platforms who use your music, that you can actually see like where how your music, how much value your music is actually worth. And that's going to be like the end, that's going to be the end game. But currently, how people are doing it is essentially Web3 community on a very, very top level is basically creating communities. Like Web3 space is all about communities. And so what you're now finding is independent artists are realizing, oh, I can tap into like my 100, 200 fans who absolutely love stuff, like love my music, and I can give them a personal experience. I can sell them an NFT and that can give me access to them. So, like for instance, you have on one end, which was a really nice example. So you had on one end you had Elon Musk's like now ex-wife. She went and did an NFT.
Right.
What was her?
Grimes.
What's her name? Yeah, Grimes. That's it. Yeah. So she went and did an NFT where she went and gamified it to a T. It was absolutely beautifully done where she basically went and created like 3 pieces of artwork. On a higher end, one was priced at like £7,500, and then on a lower end, one was priced at like not like £100. And so you had 2 tiers. But what she said was like, I'm only gonna have these on sale for a minimum of 20 minutes. If you don't buy these, you're not going to be able to get them. The only time you're going to be able to get them is on the secondary market. But after these 20 minutes, you can't buy them anywhere else. And so there was only 100 of the $100 ones, and then it was like a limited amount of the 7,500. Now, in that time, I think it was about 600 people went and bought the 7,500, like generating her about, I think it was like $4.1 million in 20 minutes.
Whoa.
And then because the 100 sold out as well, people wanted to buy them. And because the only way you can buy those $100 ones was on the secondary market, she was obviously getting 10% of the royalties on the resale value. So and obviously when you're an owner of the original NFT, you can decide how much you want to charge people to buy it on the secondary market. And so when I last checked about a couple of months ago, those 100 editions for $100 were being sold for about 20, 50, 60, $70,000. And so at 10% of the resale at 70, she's made 7 grand. And so it's like, the way how I see it is that this whole Web3 space is providing artists a new source of revenue that hasn't been explored before. And the great thing is that as like traditionally the music industry has always been hanging on the coattail of the tech space, and there's always been a case where the tech space has always had to ask for forgiveness rather than for permission. And now this is a chance for the music industry to kind of get ahead of that and actually decide on what is culturally right, decide on the rules and how they want their art to be used. And that's what I find is really, really exciting about the use of NFTs. And obviously there's loads of great use cases, but also there's terrible use cases. So like, for instance, I don't know if you guys saw, but Chris Brown, he went and did an NFT drop and it didn't really sell that well because essentially he didn't respect the process of being able to engage in your community. I mean, he did there was a 10,000 collection, and I think he only sold about 300 of his NFTs. And bearing in mind, he's got over 10 million followers on Instagram alone. And so that kind of goes to show that there is a process in having to engage with your fans and let them know what it is that they're getting and let them actually feel like they're a part of your brand, because that's essentially what it is that you're selling, because NFTs could be absolutely anything. I mean, at one stage, I even bought a tenth of a soul of somebody as an NFT because they wanted to sell it. So I was like, all right, then, well, if I, God forbid, if I ever go to hell, I know what part of the soul I'm sending there. So, so, but the point is that it's there for absolutely any. It can tokenize absolutely anything, and I think that's the exciting part about it right now.
Interesting. Wow, it's fascinating. There's actually loads of comments coming in about NFTs. I think we could probably do a podcast about this at some point, but I'd like to bring Catherine's response to all that, actually, as an environmental artist organisation. I don't know if you've had any experience of working with this kind of technology or streaming, actually, in general as well.
Yeah, it's amazing hearing you talk about it, Des. Actually, it's really fascinating, and you kind of it kind of, I was thinking actually about what you were saying around actually how important the community is around it, but also how there's a creation of a story of its journey that kind of carries with the NFTs, right? So, and how important that is in our engagement with art, with music, with kind of And I was speaking to another artist actually a couple of weeks ago who said that compared NFTs to photography, and said that when photography was first invented, no one thought that was, it was so, out there, and that's kind of like back then how kind of fundamental it kind of then became, and sort of I was thinking about that in terms of the analog versus digital as well, and kind of how kind of, I suppose, we're sort of interested in our relationship with things, whether it's with objects or whether it's with the digital kind of space, and how that's how we kind of make connections, right, in terms of understanding our world that we're in, and kind of how we're connected with it. So yeah, I find it really fascinating, and we haven't kind of explored it yet to date because it hasn't kind of necessarily been a sort of path that's made sense yet. But I find it really fascinating. I mean, like
Don't
I say,
sit on the sideline, jump in.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you're saying about value as well, and like the change of value in terms of practice and kind of and the ownership over that value that can stay with the musician, can stay with the artist, is absolutely is so important.
Yeah, just to add on that idea of value, I mean, I think that there's this. I feel like a lot of musicians don't realize that the music has changed value from when streaming came about. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are still stuck in this idea of like how the music industry was in terms of being able to sell, like you get your value from the amount of CDs that are sold. But now obviously we're living in a streaming world, which is basically a subscription model. And that completely changes how music is valued, because if you look at Spotify or any type of streaming platform, they've kept the same price all you can eat music for 9.99 for like the past 12 years. But last I checked, I mean, inflation has risen quite a bit. So surely the price of music that you pay for should increase as well. But they don't. And so therefore, and also like they said that there's like up to like 60 to 100,000 songs uploaded onto Spotify every single day, onto DSPs. And so you're, as a subscription model, you're still, your music is being diluted when it's being heard in terms of the amount of money that you're receiving. And so it's almost like you have to change the way how you view music. You have to change that relationship of how you value music. Like streaming it's not a main source unless you are in a top tier of artists and you own your masters and you can get the majority of income. But now it's about being able to kind of use that as a passport to kind of leverage other opportunities. And I feel like using like Web3 technology and blockchain tech is going to allow people, allow musicians and creatives to find another means of being able to monetize music, as well as doing shows, getting syncs, selling merchandise, tickets, and all of the other opportunities that are afforded to musicians who decide to take that step to become pros. So yeah, that's me.
And you're right, it's about market share, I suppose, streaming, isn't it, on places like Spotify. And I'm aware that music, a lot of people who write music for those sites, the very nature of how they write music to generate those streams, like sticking the chorus at the beginning of a song, for example, so people listen to those first 30 seconds and then it counts as a stream. It's completely changed how music's made. It's anti-creativity in my mind, my opinion. I don't know if Laura might have something to say about that, actually.
I'm a bit of a weird one on this, Sophie, because I'm a bit of a weird one on this because I very intentionally haven't made a CD. But actually, it was really making me think about this, listen to you talk about all of this, Des, because one of the reasons that I haven't made a CD is because of the fact that I very much believe in the live experience, and also the kind of work that I make tends to have a theatrical element to it as well. So the oral experience is already just a diluted experience of the work that I'm making. But I've always had this kind of dilemma in my head of, well, that makes it less accessible, because it means that people would have to always come to the performance, etc. And although there are some videos online from that companies have put up, it's a constant kind of conversation I'm having in my head about like the accessibility to the work, but also the fact of not making a CD. And obviously hearing Des talk about NFTs, and I was sitting there thinking, oh, what do I think about that if I was trying to kind of deep dive into the NFT world? But then I just kept thinking about, I just really love the live experience of being in a room with people, but I don't know how that then marries with the NFT world. So I definitely need to just learn more about it. I think that's what I've learned from hearing Des talk about it. So yeah.
We'll chat. I'll show you how it can work. Got some good case studies.
Business happening right here. Catherine, I know that you do a lot of international work online. You've got a lot of collaborators all over the place. Just what sort of methods do you use to facilitate that?
Yeah, I was kind of reflecting on that a bit, actually. How, I mean, working online like you say, allows us to collaborate across so many different disciplines and landscapes and geographies. And our work, it is kind of absolutely crucial to be able to do that, actually. And to collaborate, we collaborate online, and meeting in person in various ways is kind of, reflecting on this the other day, actually, how being together in spaces, particularly when we're making work about landscapes, is really crucial. Those experiences to share together and to be together, but being able to sort of take those sort of relationships we build by making work together in person to then be able to continue that online is really crucial. I mean, the work that we make, it's long running. Like the project that we're kind of working on at the moment, it took 2 years to develop, and it's running for 2 years. So it will essentially be a kind of 4-year project, which actually our work, it kind of has outputs, but it doesn't necessarily finish. You know, we do kind of, our work is sort of often, we describe it as sort of being a research-led practice, practice-led research. So that involves working for long periods of time with communities, with academics, with other artists, with designers, with rangers, in all sorts of different environments, and so that work needs time and it needs space to unravel and to develop, to then and to be responsive. I suppose that's kind of something that particularly when you're working in and around the themes that we work with, it has to be responsive. It can't be didactic. It has to develop in a collaborative, with a kind of really deep collaborative methodology. So obviously, working online means we take less flights, but that kind of balance against the work that and the themes and the kind of, I suppose, when you're bringing back understandings of an environment, of a landscape that an audience in the UK might not have an understanding of otherwise, you kind of there's a lot of balancing that goes on in terms of understanding that. But if we're not doing that work, then the kind of there's divisions that just keep growing, I suppose. So it feels important to do.
Opening up that dialogue is crucial. What's the title of your latest project? Actually, it'd be interesting for people to hear about.
So there's the big project that we're doing is called Land Body Ecologies. We're also developing an installation for Karachi Biennale, working in collaboration with Master Potter in the Sindh region, and Fakir there with called Microtonal, and working with these amazing instruments called barindos that kind of sort of there's only this one potter that can make these instruments, and the one musician that knows how to play them. So once it feels like they're kind of, it's a dying kind of culture of using these instruments. So we're kind of working in collaboration to make an installation that responds to those dying kind of traditions, and those musical scales actually that only exist with this instrument.
And absolutely fascinating. And of course, like having that information online is so crucial, and researching these. I'm going to go back to that first question. Really, like, is digital? What is it? Is streaming always the greener option? Was the kick-off point of the talk. I feel like we've covered so many different topics, but before we get into questions from the audience, has anybody got any final thoughts about that question? Have we come to any conclusions? I think the answer's no. But I don't know. Has anybody got any thoughts about it? No. Should we have to think about that one later on, won't we? We'll keep getting into it. Right, we've got some questions from the audience. So Sam Wells asks, how much of the issue with digital streaming, more footprint than air travel, is to do with the sheer numbers and the practice of servers, Google, etc., and how much is the user's responsibility? That's a big question. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts about that one.
I certainly can't answer it, but I know that in that article they talked about, I think it was like something like 50% of the kind of data usage online was related to kind of 30 websites or something, like the top 30 websites, which included Google and Facebook and those companies, but also Amazon. And it was also talking about the nature of those websites and their kind of psychology to encourage people to consume more. So it was talking about that aspect of it. So I think, I mean, the only thing I can say in terms of an answer to that question is go and read the article because it's really good. But also, yes, inevitably, I think that a lot of it is to do with kind of policies being put in place in terms of the power that these top websites hold and these servers hold, and how that can be monitored more closely. And it's not just the user's responsibility, of course.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Anybody got anything else to add to that?
I suppose it is more users' responsibility, because with these platforms like Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, we're in the attention economy. So they want us to be on our phones 24/7. I mean, they try to kind of combat it, like Apple, where they show up your usage for the week. But I don't know if anybody pays attention to that, because if I want to see fluffy cats on Instagram over and over again, best believe I'm going to see my fluffy cats. So it's definitely down to users' responsibility. I think another thing that they mentioned as well was like the servers and stuff, being able to cool them down and being able to have, because that's where a lot of the energy is also coming from as well, apart from like our phones and us charging our phones every single day. So just to add on that, definitely go and read that article. Is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I've got a question via the Music in Kirklees. How can we square the convenience of online collaboration? Convenience is an interesting word. Global accessibility of content, etc., with the excessive power usage of servers. Yeah. How can we square it? Don't know. Catherine, have you got any thoughts about that one?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we do as a studio practice is that for storage of our assets, I mean, we do create a lot of digital assets. we create a long-running durational audio recordings over, quite large distances. We store it on our own servers in our studio, because we know we can then control the the green energy tariff that we're using for our electricity, and we have a little bit more it kind of, we know exactly what our footprint is in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it's those potentially hidden kind of understandings of the power usage of using platforms like Zoom and communication platforms. Yeah, that kind of information isn't easily accessible and isn't easily kind of understood, or kind of, how do we go about kind of understanding that and weighing that up? It is quite difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's also new, of course, And okay, Des, what do you think of blockchain sites like Ujo? Do you know this one? Being used by artists and musicians for releasing their music.
I think that they're great. I mean, nobody really cares about doing their own personal smart contracts and all of that palaver, getting a MetaMask, which is going to be a part and parcel of things. So I feel like at the moment, in the timeline of Web3, we're at the education phase, and also we're at the cheap wins phase. And so if there are platforms that could help progress and help educate artists by taking on that heavy burden of the coding and just make it so that it's just seamless, I think that that's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, definitely try out. There's loads. I mean, there's another website called Audius, and they said they did an offer where they were paying the equivalent of like 2,000 Audiuses, which was like a good couple of £100 just for people to upload their songs. And so there's loads of different incentives out there and loads of different platforms where they just want to be able to get IP on there. So yeah, I definitely think that they're great.
Okay, I've never heard of it. I'm gonna have to give it a Google. Okay, one last one for Des again, actually. So Des, in what sense would an MP3, for example, be on the blockchain? Is it literally the binary of the file or a link to a server somewhere? In which case, who runs that server? That's a very technical question. I don't understand half of that, if I'm honest. But I'm sure you
Okay. Yeah, so the idea is that when you just for context, when you put a song on the blockchain, it's obviously it's code, and not everything you can't put like when it's code, the amount that is available for people to store that code is like literally kilobytes, like it's tiny. And so what they do is that instead of putting the actual song on the blockchain, they'll put a website link that will link you to the song. So obviously with that, that means that you can basically swap in and out that website link, and you might think that you're buying a song, but really what you're doing is getting pictures of fluffy cats. And so that's where the issue lies at the moment. And so on certain blockchains, it is you don't actually own the actual song, you own a link to the song. And so, like, for instance, on Ethereum, that's like that's where like the first NFTs were created on, and where this whole concept came from. Now, you do have other blockchains, like, for instance, Bitcoin Cash, Near Protocol, where you can actually embed your music onto the blockchain. And that is really, really cool. So it's almost like the next generation, like, yeah, Bitcoin, which is your first gen, and you got Ethereum, which is like your second gen, and then you've got like the next lot, which is like your third and fourth generations. And so in that, what I will say is, like, for instance, when you had like the first Apple Macintosh computer that came out in the 80s, that's not the best technology out there. I mean, how much you can't even put like one song on there now. And so likewise, when it comes to blockchain tech, it's the same concept. When you've got the old blockchains, like your Bitcoins or whatnot, they're not the best tech. So I wouldn't suggest you putting your MP3s and whatnot on there, because they'll just be on IFPS files that anybody can own. So technically you don't own them. So whereas if it's on a blockchain that you can actually put your files on, that you can actually own, then yeah. So hopefully that answers your question.
Brilliant. Cool. Well, thanks. Final thoughts before we end this broadcast. We've been all around, we've been everywhere in the digital world.
I just want to say thank you to
Laura.
Des. I've learned so much. So thanks so much, Des, for all of your insight. It's been really great to hear all about where your area of expertise is. It's super interesting. So thank you.
Now, honestly, thank you guys. It's been lovely sharing the panel with you. Yeah, honestly, if you guys want to be able to reach out, I'm Des at Soga World. We're doing some really dope stuff in the space. Actually, I don't mind saying this, but for instance, we're going to be doing the first NFTs that are going to impact the chart positions. So when you buy an NFT, it actually contribute as a bundle towards the chart. So hopefully we're going to be trialing this out with H and his album coming out on the 19th of August, close to home. And yeah, when you buy that, it will impact it. So hopefully he'll be the first artist, fingers crossed, to get to #1 using NFT tech. So I'm putting it out there, and he's up against Madonna, so he's got to beat Madonna in order to make that happen. So yeah.
Oh, good luck. Yeah, Catherine. Yeah, it's great to see you as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. Excellent. Right, I can tell you what then, let's say goodbye to everybody. I will end the broadcast, and thanks to everyone for watching. Perhaps we'll see you again in this digital way. Okay, take care everybody. Bye.